It's time for another tech tip. This time, we're going to look at automation, Apple numbers, and then how to do a little bit more with dictation. So this is a little shortcut that I made called Crypto Market Update. It's nothing special, but what it does is it grabs several different cryptocurrencies, calls the Coinbase API to get the result of the current value of the cryptocurrency. There, and I'm just walking through it as just getting a REST API and getting the values, and then I want to update a numbers spreadsheet with those values. So here it is. I opened up the number spreadsheet. I'm going to remove the current values that are in there, and I'm going to then run the shortcut. And as you can see, I have to choose the spreadsheet. It runs through and refills them all in just like magic. But isn't the idea of a shortcut to just simply do it? Why the file picker? And I guess that's a common question that many people will have. So shortcuts have automatic rights to a shortcuts folder in iCloud. However, they don't have automatic rights, or they cannot write automatically to a file somewhere outside of that shortcuts folder. So as my number sheet is in the numbers folder, not inside the shortcuts folder, that's why the document picker is there. However, as I want to manually remove entries, I kind of work with the two side by side anyway, so that's okay. Now, if you want to actually save files and edit files automatically, just make sure they're inside the shortcuts folder, and I recommend creating a subfolder inside of that folder to separate your shortcuts. All right, so there's a couple things that I want to do here. I want to do an interactive shortcut. So I want to be able to talk to my shortcut and have it saved to a numbers sheet. So in order to do that, I got to do a couple things. One, I don't want to have to type on the screen. I want to speak totally to it. So to get started, I'm going to do I'm going to look for a text field. So we're going to put that text field over there, and we're going to say, let's do a fuel one. So I'm filling up my car with gas, and I want to track gas, mileage, the works. All right, so how much was the fuel? Simple enough question. What's the next question we're going to ask? We're going to ask the next question. We're going to ask, how much did it cost? Now we can figure out the cost per liter or per gallon or whatever based on the two numbers that we put in, so we don't have to worry about asking that particular question. But I also want to know the mileage. What was the mileage? So kilometer, mile, stand, whatever it happens to be. So very simple, 3 questions I want to ask. Now to ask those 3 questions, I want the system to speak to me. So I'm going to pull this over and I'm going to have it speak. Now, by default, it's going to take the regional settings of your device. So in my case, regional settings is German. However, I want to speak to it in English. So I'm going to go ahead and go to English. And of course, you can choose whatever Siri voice that you want to use. And I want it to speak that text. And of course, I want to do that now 3 times. So I'm going to take and drag that over here. And I'm going to change each one of these each time to make sure I'm doing my right region. And so now when I run this, the only thing it's going to do is it's going to speak, speak, speak. Doesn't do anything else, right? So we can see that in action here. So
how much was the fuel? How much did it cost? What was the mileage?
So that's all it did. It just spoke those 3 phrases to me. So now, though, I want it to do a dictate of text, right? Now, the dictation of text is what it's going to do is, again, you choose your settings. So if it's English, German, whatever, and I want it to now dictate text. And then I have to get text from input. So then I get the dictated text from the input. And what I want to do is I want to save that into a variable, right? Why do I want to do variables? Because then I have it, I can do other stuff with it later on, right? So I'm going to set the variable to that dictated text, right? And this is the fuel. So I'm just going to write in fuel, right? Then we're going to do the same thing again. We're going to dictate the text right after the speaking. Change that regional setting again. Here we go. And we're going to get text from input. And we're going to set that to a variable. Here we go. And this one was the cost. So we're just going to save that as cost. Now we're going to turn into the dictate again and change that as well. If you're working in the same language and region that you live in, you won't have to do these little steps of changing that. However, I live in Germany and I use the device in English. So for me, I have to make that change. Now, if I was going to share this shortcut, I would actually make sure I go back and reset these as the default, because then whenever I share the shortcut with someone and they get a copy of it, it actually modifies that automatically to the regional settings. However, if I share it in a specific region, not my regional settings, then it doesn't revert it when the next person does. So, and this one is mileage. So, got all that in there now. So now I can put a text field down here at the bottom, and inside that text field, as you can see down here at the bottom, I now have the variable prompts, so I can go to the text, the dictated text, clipboard, current, shortcut, input, whatever it is, or I can just actually go in here and put fuel, cost, mileage, and it will put the parameters of those items. Now, in order for this to work, I also now need to go into numbers, and I need to create a spreadsheet that I want to use for this. So let's go ahead and do that. All right, so I'm just inside of numbers, and I'm just going to go for very, very simple. I'm just going to get the blank template here, and I'm going to call the sheet, I'm going to call this fuel, right? And the table, I'm going to call it log. Okay? Very simple, very straightforward. That's all there is to it. Now, remember what I said though. In order for me to write to my file directly without having to use document picker and everything like that, therein lies my challenge. Because when I go to numbers in the iPad, it of course puts everything into that numbers folder directly. So what I have to do is, now that I have this spreadsheet saved, right? You've created it, it's there. What are we going to do? We're going to put in here, for example, the date, the fuel, the cost, and the mileage, right? So that's our three fields that we're going to do. What I need to do is I need to move this spreadsheet now over to my shortcuts folder, which means that I need to make sure I have a folder for this particular shortcut, or I just need to put it into the root directory of all shortcuts. And the reason that I want to create the folder and I want to do it this way is because, like I said, I don't want to physically have to interact with my phone when I do all of this. I want to just speak to it so that when I jump in my car and I start driving away from the gas station, I can say, "Hey, Siri," and I can ask her to fuel log or something like that, or I can say add to the fuel log and whatever we call the shortcut, and she will then prompt. In my case, I use the Siri female voice from the US. However, Siri will prompt for these questions and then save the values into the spreadsheet. So that's the whole idea here. That's what we're trying to accomplish with this. So I have the spreadsheet now. Now I need to move it over to the shortcut folder. Is right here in the overall spreadsheet listing. I've put my finger down on the blank 2, which was the new one. And now I've tried and I said I chose to move it, and I created a folder under my shortcuts called fuel log. And I'm just going to hit move. And it moves that over there. So then it's there. All right, so in the shortcuts folder, fuel log, it's there. And I want to rename this. And I want to call it just log, right? It's also case sensitive, so I'm just going to call it log. Plain and simple, just log, right? So done. So now I have a numbers file in here called log. That's it. That's all there is to it. So now I'm prepped to go back into my shortcut and start interacting with this log file. Now, as I said, there's a few other steps that you can do if you're going to share the shortcut and you want to make sure that somebody who doesn't have this doesn't have to manually go do these steps. You can actually have the shortcut do it for them. But since this is for me and only me, or it's for you and only you if you happen to be following along, you can just create all this stuff manually. If anybody's interested and really would like to see how those extra steps can be done to create the folders automatically, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, or even have the log file, this blank template that we have right now created dynamically when you run the shortcut for the very first time, I could do another video on that, but just let me know. All right, so I've got it in there. It's there. So now back to our shortcut. All right, so now that we have our file and we've moved the file into our folder, now we need to, of course, in our shortcut, do some modifications. Well, one, I don't need the text box at the bottom just to show those variables, so we're gonna delete that. But I do need to get file. So I'm going to add the get file. And as you can see here, document picker is selected by default. So if I wanted to look for the document, if it was outside of my shortcuts folder, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, that's what I could do. But I don't want to do that. I want to actually say where it is. And as you can see, it already prefaces shortcuts, and I cannot change that because shortcuts can only automatically write into their area of iCloud. So here we called it fuel log, right? And it is case sensitive, so we need to make sure we have that in there like that. All right, so it's in there like that. We called it fuel log, and we called it log. Now, the one thing that we have to be sure of, though, is that we need to be sure that we get the right extension and everything as well. So it's called log, case sensitive, and the extension is numbers because it's a numbers file. So by doing this, we now know the exact file that we're going to write to. What we now need to do is look for our numbers app, and we see what we have here and able to do. So here the coin, which is the name of my crypto file and all that, but I want to use the add to spreadsheet. And we're going to add to spreadsheet, and we're getting it from the file, and we're going to do this show more here, and this is where we do our values. So remember, we had fuel cost and mileage, I believe, were the cells. However, we also had the date field first. So I'm going to select the date, and I'm going to do a custom date format because it doesn't need to get all crazy with the date. And I'm actually just going to put in the day, the month, the year, and we'll just do a little hyphen in there. So day, month, and year for the date. Then I'm going to add the next value, which was the fuel. And that's where we want to double check, make sure you're putting the values in properly because otherwise nothing works out. So the first one was fuel. Then we do the next value is cost, and the final value was mileage. And that's the 4 fields that we want to do in. And we want to do on the sheet, remember we called the sheet fuel, and we called the table log, right? Again, case sensitive, so keep that in mind. So provided everything works properly, when I run this, I should then be able to speak to it. And it should then take those values and add them straight to the spreadsheet. So let's give that a shot. All right, so using the multitasking, I just have the sheet here opened, just hanging out over on the side. I've got my thing here. Let's try it. When I hit run, it should prompt me for values, and let's see what happens. So as we can see here, it added to the bottom of the row, and I spoke too quickly. I didn't wait for the beep where the dictation was waiting for me. So of course it didn't capture all of that. So that's just a kind of a training thing. The cost is in there. The mileage is in there. Okay, so here we go. I've rearranged my screen a little bit. Now I've got the focus on the sheet. My shortcut's still there. It's very small. I've selected all the rows, and what I want to do is I want to actually delete those rows. All right, so now I want to select this column, right? So I want to select the whole column for date because I saw in there that it put the date in a weird format that I didn't care for. So I'll just select the column, set the formatting, and go over to the cell format. I want to put it in as a date and time. So there we go. And the cost, I want to select that one as well, and I want to format that one, and I want to put it in as a currency. So there we go. So everything's good. So we're going to run through this again. I'm going to attempt to make myself wait for that beep. It's a matter of training, right? And try this again.
How much was the fuel?
And let's modify that first question to not how much was the fuel, how much, we'll just call it how much fuel, right? Because we're looking for, in my case, liters. So let's do that. How many liters of fuel? That should prompt me, right? So again, just kind of modify this as you do things. But we're going to run it again. Here we go.
How many liters of fuel?
27.
How much did it cost?
€17.83.
What was the mileage?
52,806. There we go. That's much better. So I have a date in there. The date's still not exactly the date that I want, but that's okay. You can play around with it. The fuel has the amount of liters. I have the cost in there, and I have the mileage in there. So why is this interesting, or why does it matter to be able to do this? Well, one, we don't need these columns either, so we can delete those columns. Because what we can do is we can now do charts and everything like that in this number sheet on tracking our fuel consumption, our mileage consumption over time. So you can actually do a chart based on the time in the mileage column, do different charts and everything like that. And because you do it based on the table, every time that I update this now, every time I run it to update it. So yeah, whenever you update it, the charts automatically update as well, which makes this really nice for having a nice little add-on to keep track of things using graphs and everything like that. So what do we have to do next? The final steps. One, you click next up in the top corner there, and you give a name to your shortcut. The name is how Siri responds. So you say, "Hey Siri, update fuel log," and she'll launch this shortcut. Then we can choose a color if we want to change the color, a glyph. I know there's a car in here somewhere. Let me find the car. That's right. There we go. We're going to pick the car, add the car, and we have a brand new shortcut that we can call whenever we want just by saying, "Hey Siri." Simple, easy, and to the point. It's time for another... Why, that's not... It's time for another tech tip. Oh, why am I staring like that? Try that again.